Hello everyone, this workshop is prepared by CMS Career Management Service in John Molson School of Business. The purpose of today's workshop is to help students with their resume writing, more specifically those who are in the process of accounting recruitment, whether it's for full-time jobs, summer internships, or co-op. To give you some background, before accounting firms used to require candidates to write an application called KC form. It was a monstrous document, usually more than 6 pages, with very specific requirements. Recent years, firms have been gradually replacing KC forms with resumes to simplify the application and reduce the work for students. However, due to the fact that there are some specific information that firms want to know, and those information usually would not have been included on a regular resume, we came up with this resume sample to help students navigate and make sure you personalize your resume for accounting recruitment. Before we start, I want to stress that today's workshop is really focusing on resume for accounting recruitment. We'll be going over all the sections together and talk about tips on how to polish your resume and some tips for recruitment. If you're not familiar with resume writing in general, I would suggest you attend the workshops by CMS or go to our website and look for the resources. You'll be able to find some more detailed information on general resume writing there. Firstly, let's take a look at some of the key principles for writing a resume. It needs to be relevant to the job position and job description. Your content should be value-adding. Don't just submit the resume that you used to apply for a random job 2 years ago. If you're not sure about whether to include an experience or not, ask yourself, what am I trying to say by putting this on my resume? What value does this bring on my application? Make sure your content is all relevant and value-adding. Another thing is, the structure and title of your resume could be flexible. There are so many different ways of writing a resume. At the end of the day, it's really up to you on what and how it will look like. People can give advice and tips, but you need to be comfortable with your application. The next point I want to mention is make sure your resume is relatively straightforward and easy to read and understand. Yes, there are many different ways and versions of a resume, but it is a tool of communication. You want to be able to make your points across easily. One big principle on a resume writing is free from error. And I don't mean free from material error, it's free from error. Most candidates who go through accounting recruitment process is applying for jobs in audit and tax, which requires very high attention to detail. It just seems ironic and nonchalant if you submit a resume with errors on it. So make sure it's error-free. A final point I want to say is try to link this resume writing process as part of your interview process. A general mentality students have is that they'll write a general resume and submit it for everything. Then sometime later, they'll prepare for interviews if they get a call. This creates a disconnection between the two actions. It'll be much more beneficial if you're in the interview mode when constructing your resume. This way, your resume material will be more relevant because you're already thinking about how this applies to your interview. This will also help you greatly in your interview preparation process as well. Here is a sample of resume for accounting recruitment. There's also a letter of intent part that is not shown here. We'll go over that later. Take a look at the general structure. Start with your contact information, summary and highlights, education, academic projects, professional experience, tactical skills, extracurriculars and volunteers, and other interests and activities. As mentioned before, the structure is flexible. For example, I like to have my experience section next to each other, so I put my extracurriculars and volunteers experience right after the professional experience, and I put the skills section after the experience section. It's up to you on how you want to personalize your resume. We'll go through this workshop section by section. Again, once you're familiar with the format and writing principles, you can play with it, adjust it, and personalize it on your own. As long as you include the essential information, it's up to you how to present it. Before we go to the sections, here are some general guidelines. First, you want to work on your resume in Word, but send in PDF. Many firms have different versions of Word. You don't want them to open your file and the format is all messed up. Next, save your resume with corresponding job descriptions in the same folder after applying. It happens so often that students submit an application and a few weeks later, they get a call from the employer for an interview, and students were like, wow, I don't even remember applying for the position before. And by the time the position was probably, the job posting was probably already removed. Now for accounting recruitment, it all happens really fast in a short period of time, so it won't be an issue, but still it's good practice to save your application with job description together. Next, make sure your font size and type are easy to read. Use professional font types, such as Calibri, Times New Roman, or other fonts that looks professional. As for size, it depends on the length of your resume. A general rule is, print your resume out and read it, and make sure it is not too hard to read. Another point on the format is, you want to try to adjust your resume to complete pages, 1 or 2 pages, depends on your experience level. It just looks incomplete if you have a page and a half. Also, generally speaking, don't go over 2 pages. You can play with margins, section titles, font size to achieve the goal of having complete pages. Now let's start with the basic information. Your name and contact information should appear on every page. I personally use my name and contact information as a header. It's easier and consistent. It appears on every single page of my application, include the last page for letter of intent. You want to use professional email. Concordia email expires a while after your graduation, so I personally use Gmail. Also, set up a professional voicemail as well if you're in a process of recruitment. LinkedIn could be a good tool for firms to know more about you. Develop your LinkedIn profile and personalize your URL. Get rid of the digits at the end of your initial LinkedIn address. One thing I want to stress here is it is beneficial for you to add a photo on your resume. It is unique and only for accounting recruitment. Mostly because if you're writing this application, you have probably already been to a firm tour or the networking events, and you have already talked with the firm representatives. It is much easier to remember a face than a name. If you put a photo on your resume, they'll be much likely to remember who you are, particularly if you have had a great conversation with them already. That being said, firms cannot ask you to include a photo during your application process. It is not allowed. But if you're comfortable and you have already been networking, it is very beneficial to include a photo on your resume due to the large volume of candidates applying for the position. So the first section is availability, and this is special to resume for accounting recruitment, as you won't see it on any other resumes. Basically, the firms want to know about your prospective CPA designation and path. So show essential information such as availability, expected graduation date, CPA program info, and etc. Also, feel free to personalize it. On the sample template we provided, not all the bullet points will apply, so just pick and write the ones that applies. Let's take a look at the example. Here, what we have on the resume is what we have on the resume sample. So it has available to start work as of bachelor degree completed by start of CPA program, start of national program. So obviously you only need to choose one. If you are choosing to start your CPA at Concordia or McGill, you don't have to have the line of start of national program. You can just delete that part because it's irrelevant. Let's take a look at the below for a real example. So these candidates only have availability to start work in whichever date, bachelor degrees completed by, start of CPA program, and expected location. Very often, it is not decided when and where students are going for their CPA. It is fine. Just put on the ones you plan to do. Firms understand that you are still in school, and some of you are probably just applying for summer internships, so CPA is still a bit far away from you. It's okay. Just put the planned date so they get a sense of it. Here, this section is also where you can put a picture. So you can just put your picture on the right side of your general information and showcase who you are. Moving to the summary and highlights. This is an optional section, but we highly recommend you include it because it showcases your highlights right at the beginning. Make sure your bullet point is representative and relevant. A good one should be when your friends are reading it, they'll be like, yes, I see that. This is totally you. That will be representative of who you are, and you want to make sure those qualities are also what the firms are looking for. Make sure you are able to provide examples about your highlights on your resume during the interview. This is your highlight. You should prepare some very impressive and nice stories to back it up. If you have trouble writing this section, look at your friend's resume or some resources online. It's nice to have some inspirations. I personally like to go to MBTI, the Myers-Briggs personality test. Usually, they give some very well-polished phrases on your merits and skills. Again, just make sure what you put is representative of you. Finally, don't overdo the bullet points. At the end of the day, it is not about how much you write, but how much people remember. Sometimes less is more. I want to say 4 to 5 bullet points of highlights is enough. If I see a highlight of 8 bullet points, to be honest, I just assume it's not honest and probably a bit over-exaggerated. And here is a sample resume and a student's resume for this section. Some soft skills are always desired: learning abilities, critical thinking, communication, time management. If these are what you're good at, great. Highlight them and make sure you have amazing examples to back them up. Moving on to the next section, education. You can indicate your major, minor, co-op, exchange, etc. You don't have to list your accounting courses taken. Usually firms will train you well on anything you need to know for work. So don't worry about having no prior knowledge in audit if you're applying for a summer internship. But if you want to list the actual courses because you have a very specific interest, say in US tax, which is not required by regular CPAs, and you're applying for US corporate tax position, it will be a good add-on to indicate the course you've taken. Certificate and training can also be listed here or in a separate section in the skills section. If you know tax prep, CCH, caseware, feel free to list it here or in the other section. I personally prefer to have those in the skills section just because it catches more attention there. But again, it's up to you on how you want to personalize your resume. Generally, there is no need to include pre-CJAP education. It is a bit too far back and not very relevant. CJAP is okay to include, just use reverse chronological order. A final point I want to address here is GPA. So GPA is not required to be included here. However, you will submit your transcript so they will know your GPA anyway. Many students stress about their GPA. Well, don't. Obviously, it's nice to have an outstanding GPA, but it's the overall package the firms are looking for. A well-rounded candidate with 3.5 is better than someone with a 4.0 but has nothing on his resume. You need to make sure your GPA is good enough to get into CPA school or the national program. And yes, for those of you who don't know, there is a national program as well. The GPA requirement is usually a bit lower and it is more flexible in terms of time. You can talk to your advisors and discuss further to see which CPA program fits you better. Now, the example of education section. Again, here we have the sample of resume and an example from a student's resume below. See the arts and science scholar on a student's resume. If you just list the awards without the description, we'll be like, okay, that's nice. But if you put the description down of top 1% of the faculty, it is much more impressive. So again, make sure you include a brief description after the awards received. Don't assume people will know. Moving on to academic projects. This part is optional. If you don't have much work or volunteer experience, you can choose to include this section. Preferably, you want to use an accounting course for your financial reporting or audit class, any group work you did. Include a brief description of the project, including goal, process, and the results. It is the same principle as writing a professional or volunteer experience. use the W5 exercise in reverse chronological order. If you're not familiar with these, go to Connection website and look for resume writing tips. You want to focus on your contribution. It's good to show teamwork, but you need to know what difference you've made in the project. And here is an example of the academic projects. Look at the time. If you remember, we have been choosing to align the time to the right for the previous sections. So here, make sure you're consistent with the format and align the time to the right at all time. The next section we are covering is professional experience. You want to highlight assurance, tax, or other accounting-related experience if possible. If you don't have any, it's fine. Other non-accounting related experience can demonstrate transferable skills as well. You want to showcase your transferable skills if you don't have prior accounting experience. For example, being a waiter or waitress, you may be great with communication and you're highly bilingual. Highlight those skills and don't underestimate your experience. If you don't know what to pull from your prior work experience, come to see an advisor. They are very good at helping you finding the highlights. The title of this section is flexible. You can call it work experience, accounting experience, leadership experience, however you want to emphasize. One important point is that you want to show your impact and not just your responsibility. Instead of listing all the works you did, think about what difference did you make in a position. How would it turn differently if someone else were doing it instead of you? How did you bring additional value to the job? How did you go above and beyond what was expected from you? I know this could be tricky, but it can really help you stand out from the rest. Reflect and write them down. This brainstorming process will help you with your actual interview process greatly. An easy way to show impact is to quantify when it's possible, whether it's performance evaluation, billable hours, dollar value, or frequency. And finally, ensure your format consistency. If you're bolding the positions, bold all of them. If you're making company names italic, make sure it applies to all. Here is an example of the professional experience section, and below is the student's resume excerpt. Now, if you look at the student's experience, it is very technical. The students have already done a co-op in expatriate tax, so when he's applying for a similar job, he can be more technical in what he did because it will give the team an idea of what he's capable of. But generally speaking, you don't have to be this specific if you're not applying for the same field. You can also see here the student is trying to show the impact by giving examples of initiatives he or she started, or showing the workload, or to showcase the time management skills, average hours per week during busy season, and etc. Next section is the technical skills, or the language skills. You can separate the section in two if you want to. It really depends. If you're only bilingual, then I would probably keep the language section with the technical skills together. But if you know 4 or 5 languages, it's something that's very impressive, and I would separate the language skills section in a different section by itself, just because it grabs more attention. Again, it's a personal choice. Some examples of important technical skills for audit jobs are Excel, French, English. You want to specify the level of skills and bear in mind of the position's requirement. For example, an intermediate Excel level in corporate finance or investment banking is very different from intermediate in accounting. Know the job you're applying for and know the requirements. At the end of the day, you need to be comfortable about what you put on your CV because otherwise you'll get nervous during interviews. Language level specification is optional because what you consider an intermediate may be advanced for someone else or vice versa. So it's up to you to decide if you want to specify the level. I personally do specify the level just because I feel that you're implying you're fluent if you don't. And I'm not fully fluent, so I want to make sure that I'm upfront about it. That being said, based on our experience, most students tend to underestimate their language levels. So be more confident. If you're still in the process of learning English or French, what you can do here is to highlight the progress or the efforts you have taken. You also have the option to include certificates and trainings in this section. So let's take a look at the next slide for some examples. So again, here the top is the sample resume and the bottom is an excerpt from a student's resume. You can see here this student included Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and some accounting softwares, and some other prospective trainings. Moving on to the next section is the volunteer and extracurriculars. So volunteer and extracurricular activities can add great value and diversity to your resume. Firms love it when you give back to the community. It also showcases your time management skills and probably some other soft skills as well. You can separate this section based on your own situation. For example, you can do it by, say, case competition, leadership experience, mentorship experience, etc., etc. The title is flexible. Just like with all the other experience sections, you want to emphasize on your contribution and achievements and be ready to talk about them during interviews. A final note is try to get involved on and off campus if you're still early in your program. CMS, JMS, JMCC, FISA, they are all great places to get involved. It provides great opportunities for you to network and you'll benefit substantially. Now, let's take a look at the examples here. This candidate, instead of using volunteer experience as a title, he named this section leadership experience to highlight his or her leadership skills. There is a combination of case competition, consulting, and coordinating positions. So try to have a diverse experience that offers different perspectives. Firms are very, very big on case competitions. So join JMCC, Jus de Commerce, SCBC, Omnium Financier, join these case competitions, and speaking from personal experience, you'll benefit a lot. So the final section before we go to the cover letter part is other activities and interests. This is an optional section, but I really like it because it provides a great opportunity to showcase your personality. Firms like to hire who they think they can get along with. You want to be authentic. The interest you list here doesn't have to be accounting related. So here's an example of the sample resume on this section. This candidate has experience abroad in public speaking. I would go further and talk about something even more personal. For example, do you like skydiving, hiking, hockey, etc., etc.? Something that generates fun and intriguing conversations. Be aware you need to be truthful and be ready to talk about them when asked. Now we have finished the first part of the resume. What is special about the resume for accounting recruitment is that you need to include the cover letter part as well. Combine the resume part and the cover letter part to one file, then get your resume for accounting recruitment. And you can submit the combined file to the firm. So let's take a look at the cover letter portion, and you can call it a letter of intent as well if you want to. So the good news is this letter is pretty much similar as your regular cover letter in terms of format, just a bit more specific to accounting. The sample here showcases a typical 4-paragraph cover letter, each corresponding to one topic. Why accounting, why the firm, why the candidate, and closing. Firstly, why accounting? Try to come up with something more interesting than, oh, I love numbers. Most people in accounting know it's not just about math. I don't want to limit your thinking here, so please come up with something on your own. You can talk about your passion for CPA, why you're pursuing it, and what is your plan after graduation, and etc. And now, it's time to talk about networking. I know we have been talking a lot about it, but it is truly important. Firms receive so many applications, and they will prioritize those they know and they see during the events. So that is why networking efforts and the picture on your resume comes in handy. Go to firm tours, bring your business card, be curious, ask smart questions. Go to the recruitment cocktail and showcase your personality and communication skills. You'll get a sense of which firm you prefer and you click with. And it's a mutual selection. By early networking, you will be able to filter out some firms you don't click with, so you can choose your target more strategically. And also, when you have multiple offers to decide, it will help you greatly in making a decision as well. On top of recruitment events, many students ignore the fact that firms are also very active throughout the year. With different case competitions, challenges, social events, go to those events and practice your networking techniques. It is usually less stressful because not all students around you are trying to get a job at the same time. Networking could be daunting at first, but it is something that comes with practice. And this networking can help you greatly in writing your cover letter on why accounting and why the firm. So, moving back to the second paragraph on why the firm. Hopefully, from all the networking you've done, you have met people and talked to them about their experience at the firms, about the cultures, the trainings, the CV supports, team chemistries, and etc. You want to be specific about the firm culture and value you are talking about. For example, if you just say, I'm really impressed by XX firm's social values, it sounds very vague and insincere. But if you said, I know that XXX is encouraging its employees to participate in he for she campaign, and that is a cause that I'm passionate about, it sounds a bit more genuine. If you're referring to your conversation with a firm representative in your cover letter, you want to be able to expand when writing your cover letter. Don't just name drop, I talked to Michael, Jane, and Christina. Instead, pick one or two good quality conversations and mention what you talked about and why it spoke to you. Now, moving to the next paragraph, why me? Why the candidate? Here is your opportunity to shine. And don't just say something like, I'm studying accounting and I'm eager to learn. Hundreds of other applicants are writing the same thing. Again, think about what you have that is special and unique, the achievements you have done, and how those connects you to the value the firm desires. Finally, the last closing paragraph. Essentially, it's just a typical closing. Reiterate your passion. Don't be shy to showcase your excitement and passion about the job and the firm. It is key criteria in terms of candidate selection. Also, your cover letter should not be over 1 page. And if you have already included your name in the header section, you don't have to sign your name again in the bottom. Now that we have finished the major content of the resume application, I want to mention a few points on the recruitment process. Firstly, your application. You want to read it again and again, with different time intervals. Sometimes, after an hour break, when you come back to read your application package, you'll find what you thought was perfectly worded phrase sounds a bit awkward. So don't do all the work together at the same time. Give yourself some time, and also do it properly. It would be even better if you can ask your friends to read it over for you as well. They will also be able to provide you with constructive feedback. I love asking my accounting friends reading my resume because they're really good at picking up the details, especially those not it. On a similar note, try to start your application early. The recruitment process happens incredibly fast, with firms events happening in August and pretty much all the interviews done before mid-September. You want to give yourself enough time to do proper research and get into the mode. Network and stay connected. If you add someone on LinkedIn and just disappear, and you're not active and there's no interactions, then there's not much value to it. Like we have mentioned before, go to different events and stay connected. Next, utilize resources around you. JMSB provides great opportunities and resources for career services. CMS career advisors, your friends, associations, classmates, professors, they can all be helpful in terms of the recruitment process. Don't be shy to ask. The last and final tip is show your personality and your authenticity. We've all been through recruitment process. We know what it's like. It's fine to be nervous. It's fine to feel a bit off, but you want to power through it and really make sure you let them know who you are. Have your brand and own it. Personality is always key in recruitment process. Finally, we would like to encourage you to utilize CMS resources moving forward. For accounting students, Your career advisor is Mary Wargachuk. Here is her contact information. If you have more specific questions regarding resumes, cover letters, job descriptions, mock interviews, recruitment process, and more, feel free to reach out to her or to stop by CMS to meet our volunteers.